folks come in as they will. Great. Hi, I'm Joshua Neds Fox, and this webinar is part of the Wayne State University Open Education Week programming for this year. I'm going to be talking today about open educational resources and open licenses. And bear with me, I'll let you know what we're about to do. If you're tuning in from Wayne State or from Miala, somewhere across the state, welcome. I'm the coordinator for digital publishing in the university libraries, and that involves a number of things, but includes copyright and licensing for open resources. And so that's the background that I'm coming to you to talk about this material today from. I'm going to be walking us the long way through open education, to open educational resources, to open licenses. Not in terrible depth early on, but in order to make clear why open licenses are appropriate for open educational resources beyond the obvious, and to begin to talk a little bit about the case for Creative Commons. And we'll spend some time talking about the nuts and bolts of Creative Commons and some of the practical considerations in using their licenses. And I should say the standard disclaimer, because we're going to be talking about copyright, which touches on Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and Title 17, Sections 101 through 122 of the US Code. I'm not a lawyer, and none of this is legal advice. And if you would like to implement any of these suggestions, I encourage you, if you're uncomfortable, to talk to a lawyer. Okay, so that's my disclaimer. So, open educational resources. This is the definition from the OER Commons, which is a repository for open educational resources that's run by the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management. Since you're here, you already probably have some background with open educational resources. Open licensing is a real practitioner's consideration. And so I expect that you are working with OERs, thinking about OERs. However, I think exploring this definition a bit will be helpful in thinking about open licenses. So bear with me. Open educational resources are teaching and learning materials that you may freely use and reuse at no cost and without needing to ask permission. So first, these are educational resources, teaching and learning materials that might include lesson plans, active learning modules, lectures, lecture notes, assessments, primary source collections and activities, labs. Red Hat, which is one of the companies that distributes a version of the Linux operating system and maintains the opensource.com website, says that proponents of open education think that everyone should have access to high quality educational resources and experiences. And that in the service of that, we should work to eliminate barriers to this goal, including high costs, outdated materials, and legal mechanisms which prevent sharing. Promoting collaboration is central to open education. And so all of this applies to these educational resources. And it applies to these resources being open. That is, that the goal for our educational resources, if we truly are promoting collaboration, working to eliminate barriers, is that they be found and used, and that we be able to find and use resources. Use of resources in a physical sense is relatively simple. We simply take it and implement it. But in a legal sense, there are all kinds of roadblocks that might prevent us from using or even finding educational resources. And so that's the background in the definition that lays the framework for us to begin to talk towards open licenses. David Wiley writes that the terms open content and open educational resources describe any copyrightable work, he excludes software, that is licensed in a manner that provides users with free and perpetual permission to engage in the 5 R activities. You may have seen this term before, but these 5 R's are the right to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute work. Now, I want to say that this is a moment before we dig into these 5 R's, which refer to the definition of open in open educational resources, that we need to take a quick sidebar into copyright. And it's likely that you have some background in copyright if you're even beginning to consider open licenses, but the very basics also help underpin the case for open licenses on OERs. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Copyright is a limited monopoly that the Constitution and the US Code give to authors. I'm talking in a United States context, to authors or creators over their original works of authorship. It is a suite of rights. Yes, copyrights, and they include reproducing the work, distributing the work, creating derivative works, performing or displaying publicly or digitally the work, and authorizing others to exercise these rights. And it protects original works of authorship fixed in any tangible medium of expression. Now, this will, by definition, include open educational resources, from which the tangible medium of expression from which they can be perceived, reproduced, or otherwise communicated, either directly or with the aid of machine or device. Fixation, expression, and originality are the 3 keys, and all need to be present in order for an item to be copyrightable. It has to have at least a modicum of creative expression for the courts to recognize its copyrightability. And copyright is automatically applied in the United States to any work that meets these 3 criteria. That includes explicitly literary works, musical works, including the words, dramatic words, including any music, pantomimes and choreographic works, pictorial, graphic, and sculptural works, motion pictures and other audiovisual works, sound recordings, and architectural works. If our open educational resources fall into any of those categories, then they enjoy the automatic protection of US copyright, whether or not that copyright is registered with the Copyright Office. And that copyright is limited to the author of the work. That's regardless of whether we can obtain a copy of the work due to the author's sharing activities. So perhaps an author puts work online and yet does not openly license the work, retains their copyright, and makes no indication that you have that they share any of those rights with you. Even though you can access the work, you still may not be able to use it in any way that removes the barriers to collaboration and extension and interaction that education, and perhaps open education, truly require. We should say that copyright does not extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, method of operation, concept, principle, or discovery. And this tends to work out to the basics of ideas like facts or data, titles like names or slogan, and it doesn't protect works of the US government or works in the public domain. The fundamental distinction here is between expression of an idea and the idea itself. The expression is protected by copyright. The underlying idea is not. Okay, so given that background, in the monopolies that the US Code gives to creators over the copying of their works, let's return a moment to our discussion of the goals of open educational resources, and emphasize this, that we want to eliminate barriers to this goal, including legal mechanisms that prevent collaboration among scholars and educators. And that means that we want to implement something like the 5 R's. Those 5 R's are the right to retain a work, to make, own, and control copies of the content. That is, to download, to store, to duplicate. We want to be able to reuse a work. We want to take the content and use it in a wide range of ways. We want to use it in a class. We want to use it on a website. We'd like to put it in a video. We'd like a group of students to be able to make a copy and study it. We want the right to revise a work, to adapt it, to adjust it, to modify or alter the content itself. That is, perhaps we find a resource that we'd like to use in an educational setting, but we need to make it current. It's outdated, or we have aspects of the subject that are not fully treated in the resource and we'd like to expand it. We'd like to remix the work, to be able to take other works and mash them together with our work so that we create some third thing that is new. And we would like the right to redistribute the work. That is, to share copies of the original content and or our revisions and or our remixes with other people so that they can, so that we pay it forward and they can also partake in the open education philosophy. I should note that in the OER starter kit at Iowa State, Abby Elder writes that redistribute and revise are the most commonly exercised rights in open education, but all 5 play an important role in licensing open educational resources. So for instance, without the right to remix materials, if an instructor teaching an interdisciplinary course would not be able to combine 2 disparate OER into a new resource that more closely fits their needs. So how do we affect the 5 R's, eliminate barriers to open education, including legal barriers, and make an environment where open educational resources can be used in an open education context? Well, that's why you came here. The answer is an open license. Open license is founded on the principle that copyrights can be licensed. It is indeed one of the rights embodied in copyright. They can be licensed in whole or in part, in writing, to third parties. An open license is simply a copyright license that indicates that the owner of the copyright licenses some or all of their rights under some or no conditions, and the third party is everyone who exists. That's it. You could write, I give a non-exclusive permanent worldwide license for the right to perform my copyrighted work to person X. That would be a license. And that would satisfy our need to let other people use the work, but this example is not an open license because it's limited. It does not cover all of the rights that we need in order to properly affect an open education environment. It's not universal. It doesn't cover anyone but person X as written. And so if we truly wanted to make it universal as written, we would simply need to make billions of these licenses and name every person, which is ineffective. And it's relatively weak structurally, as I stated it. There's no community of practice around this license to ensure that it's enforceable and effective. a handwritten license, while it legally does stand to license my copyrights, is a one-time thing with no indication that it would necessarily stand up in court beyond the best practice of writing it. That's where a pre-drafted open license comes in. And because it's pre-drafted and can be applied to a resource, it takes care of the universality. That is, it's not addressed to any one person, but addressed to every person. It takes care of the community of practice. That is, because it is used widely, one license used on many resources by many creators, there's more opportunity for the testing of the durability structurally of that license. And it's often written in such a way that it covers most or all of the copyrights that you would like to share in order to make open educational resources freely available. There are many open licenses that can be applied to educational materials. The OER starter kit that I previously mentioned by Abby Elder suggests the new GNU free documentation license, or Copyleft Attitudes free art license. But the most common way to share materials as open educational resources is by applying a Creative Commons license. The Creative Commons licenses are pre-drafted, standardized, free-to-use open copyright licenses. And here I'm quoting the Rebus community's authoring open textbooks in the chapter on Creative Commons. Creative Commons licenses work in parallel with copyright and not separately. They actually allow authors to retain their copyright, and they don't release necessarily authors from release any of their rights. You can create a Creative Commons license, and as long as users use the license in the way that you've intended, then they can legally use your materials. But they aren't taking your copyright, they're simply using those rights under your blessing. A Creative Commons license is a way to assign rights about how works can be shared and modified. You can think of it as, and Creative Commons encourages us to think of it as, some rights reserved. Creative Commons itself is a nonprofit organization that offers an easy way for creators to share their works consistent with copyright law. The licenses are created, maintained, and supported by Creative Commons. And Valerie Walden, in her introduction to Creative Commons licensing from late last year, writes, "It's like a self-help service that offers free form-based legal documents for others to use." Think NOLL. But only explicitly on this particular issue of open licensing. The goal of Creative Commons is to build a globally accessible public commons and make it easy for people to share their creative and academic work. And I want to point out that this aligns incredibly well with our stated goals for open education and open educational resources, that we would be able to use, people would be able to find and use the resources that we create, and that we would be able to find and use the resources that other people create. Creative Commons goals are in line with our goals as derived from our understanding of open education and open educational resources. Creative Commons licenses are thoughtfully developed as a layered approach to copyright licensing. And they're layered both in kind and in deed. And I will explain what I mean by that. They are layered in deed. That is, they are written legally as a traditional legal tool, that they would be enforceable under the legal codes, not just in the United States, but globally. And that they would adhere to the letters of the most, to the broadest copyright conventions, like the Berne Convention. so that you could be assured that anywhere in the world they would pertain. Then they are also available in a format that normal people can read, a human-readable format called the Commons Deed. We'll look at that a little in just a few minutes. And that allows us to understand it too. It's a little bit stripped down and includes some context so that we know what it is that we're applying to our open educational resource. Finally, a Creative Commons license can include a machine-readable version, which is encoded in metadata tags that can be attached to versions of an open resource that's on the web. And if those tags are available, it can make the license very easy to find on the web, meeting one of our goals for open educational resources. Creative Commons licenses are also layered in kind. That is, there are a variety of options, often indicated by various combinations of the 4 symbols you see at the bottom of this image. The person is attribution. That attribution indicates that we would that we would talk about who it is that has created the work. The $ with the slash through it is non-commercial. That would indicate that the work can only be used for non-commercial purposes. Excuse me. The equal sign is non-derivative. That means that the work has to be used exactly as created, and the reverse arrow is share alike, that the work can only be shared under the same licensing terms that you've created. These 4 factors can be mixed to create 6 different licenses. And at the very base and in every license is attribution. That is, that the one condition for the use of a Creative Commons licensed material is that you attribute the material to its original author. This is called CC BY. You can mix CC BY individually with each of the other 3 conditions that you say it either needs to be shared under the same license and attributed, it needs to be exactly as created and attributed, and or it needs to be used in a non-commercial purpose and attributed. And then you can also create a by non-commercial share alike and a by non-commercial no derivatives. And that last license is the most restrictive. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the implications of those last 2 licenses later. There is also a 1 more 7th license, and that is CC0, which is a open license way of committing your work to the public domain. You can't put a CC0 on any work that's already in the public domain, as you don't have copyright over that work, and so you can't license it. But if you would like to waive your copyrights as entirely as the legal framework allows you to, applying a CC0 license is a way of affecting a kind of public domain license over your work. All right, these last 6 to 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk practice. So how do you apply a CC license to OER? Well, the first thing to say is that you don't need to register your OER with Creative Commons. You simply go to Creative Commons and grab your license, place it on the material. If your material is on the web, you could use their license chooser to create machine-readable metadata and copy that code into the HTML of your website. It's legally valid as soon as you apply it, and that's it. You simply state the license and link to the code at Creative Commons, which allows people to realize what they need to do. And I want to link out to 3 materials to take a look at how that actually works. Okay, I'm going to pause this and share a different portion of my site at this point. Okay. So this is the Creative Commons website. This is under their Share Your Work. They have the CC licenses and examples that help explain the areas that I've walked through. And I'm pointing this out so that you can go here and read further about the licenses if you don't already know. The base license, as I said, is attribution, CC BY. And if we want to look at the human readable deed, it looks like this. It tells us that we're free to share and adapt the work as long as we give attribution, appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if any changes were made, and that we add no further restrictions to stop others from using the work under the same license. That's it. That's the human readable code. It's not a substitute for the actual legal license language, which is fully available on the site and covers all of the areas that Creative Commons has deemed would be needed to make this enforceable internationally. And those 2 elements constitute 2 of the layers in deed. The third, however, element is the license chooser, and that would allow us to create a machine-readable license. This license chooser looks a little complicated at creativecommons.org/choose, but it's actually relatively easy to use. It simply asks us first to look at features. Are we going to allow adaptations of our work to be shared? Yes, if we want the most flexible open license, we would say yes. We could say no, we want no derivatives, or we could say yes, please share, but as long as others use the same license that I'm interested in. And then we answer whether we like commercial or not. Those 2 questions and 2 or 3 answers will comprise all of the 6 possible licenses. That will show us what our license is. If we're interested in putting this on the web, we would then also include some metadata about the work. I have a open educational resource from Wayne State University that I might put here. It's by George Zidane, and that's his name. And then it's available at the OER Commons, and I might put that in my source work URL. I want my license in HTML, and the format of my work is text. This would give me the code and a normal or compact icon to copy and place in my HTML, and that would give me machine-readable description of my work that could be found in any repository that implements Creative Commons metadata. Google is hooked into Creative Commons and so can be searched for open licenses. Flickr, TED Talks, ProPublica news articles use Creative Commons license. This is the easiest way to determine what your license is. But it's not the only way. We could also, through the creativecommons.org wiki, determine how to mark our work with a CC license by example. And this is a very comprehensive guide to the practice of marking your work with a CC license. It walks you through the chooser that we just looked to, but it also gives us examples for a number of different kinds of materials that we might like to apply a CC license to. The offline document gives us a good example of the ways that we might print on a document. And that example is broken down to let us know, for instance, who the author is, what the license is, whether this is machine readable. Of course not, it's an offline document. And any other work that we need to know about applying a license to an offline document. It's probably good practice when you're applying a CC license to make sure that it's prevalent in any place where you think a user might find or use that material. So if your document or open educational resource is going to be available online on a website or in a repository, make sure that the page that's closest to that material indicates that it's openly licensed, perhaps with the license chooser metadata so that it's machine readable. But on the document itself, also indicate the Creative Commons license so that if somebody happens upon a copy in the wild, they can derive that they're free to use it and under what terms directly from the document itself. The more that you communicate that the work is openly licensed, the more likely that other users of the work will be able to put it to the kinds of educational uses that fulfill your goals for open educational resources. Let's go back now to this presentation. I want to take a quick moment to review the 5 R's and Creative Commons licensing, because if you see on the left, all of the licenses allow us to retain copies of and reuse copies of in certain ways an open educational resource. But as we move columns to the right, some of the licenses do not allow us to revise, remix, or redistribute resources in ways that are congruent with our goals for open materials. And in fact, the last 2 licenses, attribution non-derivative and attribution non-commercial non-derivative, are often interpreted as not appropriate for open educational resources because they limit the uses, they limit certain uses that may be critical in the educational environment. And so it's important to consider what your goals are for your material, and as a rule of thumb, to attempt to use the least restrictive license possible when sharing open educational resources. We should also make the caveat at this point that when you apply an open license, it's non-revocable. And a thought experiment will show that although you could take the license off the website and off the material, any material that was already shared will have that license on it, and it will be not be possible. It's not possible to take back permissions that you've already made in writing. And so although eventually future finders of the material will not remember that it was given a Creative Commons license, the materials that already go out into the wild can't be pulled back. And so think about the permanence of your Creative Commons licensing before you release your open educational materials into the wild. I should say that this Wiley's 5 R's and Creative Commons licensing is by Krista McNutt at the University of Alberta in Canada. And it's under a Creative Commons attribution license. And so I'm attributing her. Couple of comprehensive repositories for openly licensed open educational resources include the OER Commons and the University of Minnesota's Open Textbook Library. Both will have a wealth of explicitly educational materials and are focused on openly licensed materials. It's 12:35, and so it's time for questions. This is some of the resources mentioned and used in this presentation. And I'm licensing this presentation in the title slide under Creative Commons by Share Alike. And so in the chat, I will, let's see if I can figure out a way to make this available to you in the chat. Here we go. I am going to open the sharing. Currently, anyone who has the link can view. And I am going to send this link in the chat. And I am now open for questions. So if there's something you came to this webinar specifically to find out and I have not addressed it, I'd be happy to talk about it. You can enter questions in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and simply speak. This website is being recorded, audio recorded. I don't believe the chat transcription will show up in that recording. So if you feel comfortable using that, please go ahead. All right. I just want to confirm hearing none, which is okay. This is an afternoon, very short webinar on a very practical consideration. And hopefully I've given you directions to the kinds of resources that will help you reinforce many of the things that I said today as you begin to consider applying open licenses to open educational resources. I encourage you to participate in the open education community by tearing down legal barriers to the collaboration and sharing of educational resources. Make use of these licenses broadly. Find places to put your resources where they can be found by folks who are looking for openly licensed resources, and seize the day. Thank you to Miala for helping to broadcast this webinar. Thank you to folks who've attended. I think we're done about 6 minutes early, so have a great Thursday.